So hello, everyone. Welcome to our May YVSC community meeting. I am Michelle Stewart, Executive Director of Yampa Valley Sustainability Council. And thank you so much for joining us today for this very exciting conversation. Many of you know, and YVSC was established as a nonprofit in 2009. And we are guided by the mission to serve as a leader, resource, and catalyst for building a sustainable and resilient Yampa Valley region. These topic-focused monthly community meetings are designed to convene community partners and members for presentations and discussions on key issues and initiatives so that we can learn together, ask questions, connect, and find ways to meaningfully contribute to the sustainable and resilient future we need. Today, we have the great pleasure of having Colorado's Senator Dylan Roberts and Representative Meghan Lukens joining us as our featured speakers to share updates from the 2025 Colorado legislative session. This year's session was a challenging and unique one, with pressures to both balance a state budget while navigating challenges both to the state of Colorado and across the country. As I understand it, I believe over 600 bills were debated at the Capitol this year during the session, covering a wide range of issues spanning gun safety, protecting small businesses, healthcare, criminal justice and immigration, transportation, energy, environment, and more. In the end, as you'll hear today, the legislature was able to pass a balanced budget that safeguarded K-12 education and rural healthcare, while carefully and equitably distributing reductions elsewhere, along with passing numerous bills that serve the needs of rural Western Slope, Colorado. Thank you both for your joining us today and for sharing these updates and for the incredibly important work that you do for our districts each and every day. In particular, Dylan and Meghan, I would really like to thank you both for the incredibly important work that you do to seek and secure bipartisan support for bills and initiatives that safeguard our people and places. As a nonpartisan organization ourselves, we at YVSC really recognize and appreciate the ways that you listen and serve without focus on partisan divides, modeling what it means to take as our starting point our connection to place and to one another, as well as our region's shared desires for economic stability, clean energy, healthy waters and watersheds, connected transportation, supported education systems, affordable housing, and ultimately the Yampa Valley region. So thank you very much for all you do, all the ways you lead and serve our region. So before we begin the meeting today, I'll give a brief overview of the structure. Senator Roberts and Representative Lukens will share legislative updates for 30 to 40 minutes. We are flexible on that, so you can pause as you'd like, but really we have the majority of the time is really devoted to listening to the two of you. We're so grateful for the opportunity. Following that, we will have a Q&A for attendees and those that would like to ask questions. You can either post them in the chat, or after we finish presentations, you can raise your hand. And then please do self-introduce before you ask your question, just to give both Dylan and Meghan a sense of who you are. And it's just a chance for them to better connect with our region if they don't already know you. So with that, I'll get going into our introductions. And then again, just please remember to mute your microphones when you're not speaking. Because we have the great fortune of having both Dylan and Meghan beginning their professional journeys from their roots here in Steamboat, I have added a little bit of information about their origin stories for those who haven't had the fortune of meeting them individually as the incredible people that they are. And also given the fact that today is the start of YVSC's internship program, and this will be shared out with them, as well as today is Steamboat Springs High School Scholarship Night. So I know a lot of youth really look to the two of you for inspiration, and then all of us as professionals just so appreciate your roots. And so in addition to your professional introductions, I've added in a little bit of that, which I just think gives us all a fuller understanding of just how special and capable you are as the representatives that you are. So I will begin first with introducing Senator Roberts, who represents District 8, which includes the rural and mountain communities in Clear Creek, Eagle, Garfield, Gilpin, Grand, Jackson, Moffett, Rio Blanco, Routt, and Summit counties. In the Senate, he serves as Majority Caucus Chair, Chair of the Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee, and as a member of the Judiciary Committee, the Committee on Legal Services, and Legislative Council. Senator Roberts was elected to the Senate in 2022. From 2018 to 2022, he served in the State House representing Eagle and Routt counties. Senator Roberts is a third-generation Coloradoan who grew up here in Steamboat Springs. And of note, as a student at Boston College, he was inspired by Barack Obama's candidacy to create change in the nation. He was thus spurred in 2008 to take a semester off from school and return to Colorado's Western Slope to serve as a community organizer for Obama's campaign. He opened and ran the Steamboat office, which was the first ever presidential field office in the region. And the months that he spent on the road, organizing volunteers around a common vision, registering people to vote, and simply spending time with the people throughout rural Western Slope, Colorado, built connections and understandings that he invariably continues to build on and integrate into his work today. After graduating from college in 2011, he returned home to be the Western Slope field director for President Obama's re-election campaign, and then went on to obtain his law degree from CU Boulder, during which time he also worked for State Representative Mike Foote as legislative policy analyst, and there he gained his firsthand experience working in the Colorado State House. After law school, Senator Roberts moved back to the mountains and to Eagle County and began his work, which continues today, as Deputy District Attorney for Eagle County. Senator Roberts still lives in Eagle County today with his wife, Sarah, and their son, Teddy, who might be 3 now. So he was very small last time he joined us, I think a couple of years ago. And as we can see, Senator Roberts is both well-suited and highly capable of representing the social and environmental issues of our region. Through his work as Deputy DA and his work at the Capitol, he continues to achieve outcomes that serve and protect the people and places he, like us, cherishes. He works at the legislative as focusing on lowering the cost of healthcare and prescription drugs, protecting our environment and water, funding more affordable housing opportunities for locals, and promoting rural economic development. So thank you. And next, it's my pleasure to introduce Representative Lukens. I said these are going to be a little bit longer because you are just such important models for the region. Representative Meghan Lukens represents House District 26, which includes Eagle, Moffett, Rio Blanco, and Routt counties. In the House, Meghan serves as the chair of the Education Committee and is a member of the Agriculture, Water, and Natural Resources Committee and Legislative Council. Representative Lukens was elected to the Colorado State House in 2023. Like Senator Roberts, Representative Lukens grew up in Steamboat Springs and attended CU Boulder and majored in history and acquired her licensure in secondary social studies education. After college, Representative Lukens moved to Pristina, Kosovo, where she worked as a high school studies teacher at the American School of Kosovo. Following her year of teaching in Kosovo, Representative Lukens moved back to Colorado and taught AP U.S. Governments and Politics, as well as economics, at the Peak to Peak Charter School in Lafayette, Colorado. While teaching AP Government, Representative Lukens had her students explore a year-long essential question that asked, as a student, how can you be politically and civically engaged? How does understanding our political systems help you to be engaged? This question and her work with the students inspired Representative Lukens to increase her own political engagement while encouraging her students to do so, which led her to volunteer politically through varying Get Out the Vote efforts. In 2020, Representative Lukens completed her master's degree in leadership in educational organizations from the University of Colorado, Denver, with a principal's licensure, which provides her with a deep understanding of educational policy at the state level. In 2021, Representative Lukens began teaching at Steamboat Springs High School, the very school she graduated from, and which became a springboard for her current position as our state representative. Here, we again see the ways Representative Lukens' unique personal and professional relationships to the Yampa Valley equip her to effectively serve our region through her work at the Capitol. Her time spent with teachers, students, and locals throughout Routt County uniquely ground her perspectives at the state, where she works tirelessly to protect and safeguard rural Western Slope, Colorado's diversified economy, affordable housing options, water and natural resources, and our educational system. So with these introductions, it is my sincere pleasure to welcome you both, Senator Roberts and Representative Lukens, to the floor, and thank you so much for taking time to connect with us today.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for the very kind and thorough introductions. Appreciate it. And it's good to see so many familiar faces and names. And I really do appreciate the invitation. And I'm looking forward to this discussion about recapping the 2025 legislative session. I will say your bio is a little bit out of date. We have since welcomed a new baby girl into our family last summer. She'll be turning a year old in July. So that is great, and also a handful. So, but Teddy is almost 3.
Congratulations.
Yeah, they're both at preschool right now, so they won't be making a Zoom appearance. But um, thank you. And yeah, it's really great to be here. I think I will give a quick recap of the legislative session and some of the bills that I worked on in the environmental conservation water space. And Rep Lukens will do the same, but we're happy to talk about anything. Of course, not all 600 plus bills were about environmental issues. So if folks want to ask about anything else, we're happy to chat about that too. But for right now, I'll focus on kind of the jurisdiction of the YVSC as much as possible. But so we just wrapped up the 2025 legislative session exactly 2 weeks ago. We ended on May 7th. For those of you that don't know, we meet every year for 120 days, where we are in Denver at the Capitol Monday through Friday, and sometimes on weekends as well, introducing bills, having committee hearings on those bills, debating them on the Senate and House floor, taking votes on them. And it is a very busy and hectic place, but it's also one that is still very productive. As you mentioned, over 600 bills were introduced. Many of them, I think over 500 have passed both chambers. Many have been signed into law by the governor. Some are yet to be signed, but will be in the next few weeks. And over 90% of those bills typically receive bipartisan support. And so it still is a very functional and collaborative place, despite some of the national political rancor that we see at a federal level. Yeah, we just got done 2 weeks ago. The big theme of this legislative session, and you may have read about this in the paper or seen on the news, was our state budget. One of the few constitutionally required things that the legislature has to do every year is pass a balanced state budget. So we do annual budgeting in Colorado, and we have a constitutional requirement to balance the budget. We cannot deficit spend like they do at the federal level. And as we came into this legislative session, we were facing a $1.2 billion deficit that we had to account for and even up our budget. That is not because Colorado is doing poorly. Our economy is, of course, one of the best of any state in the country, but we do have this constitutional requirement called the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, or TABOR, which puts in a revenue and spending cap into our budget calculation. And so what we saw is, with the increased costs, mostly with Medicaid, and as medical inflation continue to rise faster than regular inflation, that's one of the biggest reasons why we had that deficit that we had to account for. Colorado is seeing more folks utilizing Medicaid, which is good, but it also, because the costs to provide that care have gone up, it has put a significant strain on our budget. So walking into the door on our first day of session, we knew that was going to be the biggest challenge facing us for the whole year. And thus you saw most of the pieces of legislation that were passed being policy changes and not necessarily big ticket spending items, because we simply did not have any money to spend. As the budget process worked through, the Joint Budget Committee, which is a bipartisan panel of 3 senators and 3 representatives, brought a budget to the legislature that was fully balanced, did make significant cuts, but also spread those cuts fairly evenly so that no single department or program saw too drastic of a cut, and were able to protect some of our biggest priorities, including K-12 education, which I'll let Rep. Lukens talk more about, Medicaid, and some of the other key provisions within our budget. So we did pass a balanced budget, bipartisan budget, but the unfortunate news is, going into next year, we are likely to be in a similar, if not worse off situation. And then, of course, everything that's happening out in Washington, D.C. right now with the big bill that they are debating to give tax cuts, a lot of those savings could come from cutting Medicaid even further. And if the federal government cuts Medicaid, which we typically get a 50% match on our spending on, we're going to be in a very difficult situation here in Colorado and in every state in the country. And so that's just something to know moving forward. That being said, I was very pleased with the productivity of this legislative session, both for the bills that I personally worked on and the legislature as a whole. As you mentioned, I'm the chair of the Agriculture and Natural Resources Committee, and one of my big policy passions growing up in Steamboat on the Yampa River and living here in the mountains where rivers and water are so essential to our environment and our community, our agriculture industry, our outdoor recreation economy, and so many other things. I work a lot in water policy, and we had another very productive and consequential session for water policy. So I'll touch on a few of those bills. One is our annual water projects bill that we pass every year, where we allocate funding that we get from severance tax revenue and sports betting revenue, primarily. Those are the two biggest sources of funding for water. Was a near historic level of funding for this year's annual water projects bill. Thankfully, even despite our tough budget challenges, because we have set ourselves up to get funding for water from other sources, not the general fund, we were able to allocate a large amount of money to water projects in the state, including one really important project on the Yampa River that is going to continue to get funded from the state. So that was positive. We also found a way to increase the annual funding we'll be getting for water projects from sports betting by another bill that I worked on, which will eliminate the tax deductions that sports betting companies currently receive for their promotional bets or their free bets, as a way to attract them to Colorado. When we first legalized this in 2019, we allowed them to deduct the tax that normally goes, the water tax, from those promotional bets. They're obviously doing very well. I'm sure all of you see the commercials and all of that. We have plenty of sports betting companies here now, and so we're gonna slowly roll off that deduction, which will increase our water funding from sports betting by over 25% a year, or close to $12 million additional every year to what we're currently getting, which is about $31 million. So whether you partake in sports betting or not, it is, no matter how you feel about it, it is doing really positive things for water in our state. I also worked on a bill that is going to create a task force to study the future of severance taxes in our state and how it relates to funding our water projects. As we know, severance taxes, which are the tax associated with the extraction of oil and gas and coal and other minerals, is a volatile source already. But we also see severance tax revenue being used to balance the budget and not being used for water, especially in these tough budget times. And I was worried, and many are worried about, what does that look like 10 years from now when severance taxes may be much less than they are now? How are we going to make up that difference for our water funding and for the important things that severance tax currently funds? So as we transition to clean, renewable energy, we're going to see less severance tax revenue, but we need to find a way to still fund the important things that severance tax funds. So that task force will work now. That bill just got signed into law. They're going to begin their work next month, and over the next year and a half, come up with some recommendations on what we should do moving forward. I did work a lot in the affordable housing space. I'll just mention that briefly because that is so important, of course, to the Yampa Valley, finding ways to keep people who make our community run, our teachers, our first responders, our healthcare providers, our small business employees, our resort employees. We need to continue doing more to find and create more attainable and affordable housing options for them. So we passed several bills that will help with that: construction defect reform, some bond initiatives to help buy down construction costs for first-time home buyers, and a variety of other things that we kept working on in the affordable housing space. And then let's see, we of course continue to work with the Department of Natural Resources on a variety of things. That department is in charge of wildfire efforts within our state. We passed several measures to help with more wildfire mitigation, which is going to be more important now than ever, as we see the U.S. Forest Service cutting back employees or not having any employees at all. The state's going to have to step up as far as forest management and mitigation. So there were several bills passed around wildfire. We were also able to protect some of the existing funding sources for mitigation in our state budget. So that was positive, even despite some of the tough budget times that we're having here in our state. And then finally, I'll mention a resolution that I was proud to bring forward into the Senate that passed with a bipartisan vote. A resolution doesn't have any legally binding effect in Colorado, but it is an important message that we sent from the legislature. This was Senate Resolution 9 that called on Congress to protect our public lands and basically say, please don't sell off our public lands. They provide such value to our economy, to the communities that use them, and our environment as a whole. As you've probably seen, Congress is considering a variety of pieces of legislation to allow more oil and gas drilling on public lands, which could be catastrophic for a variety of reasons. And so we actually passed with a hugely bipartisan vote, a resolution that we sent to Congress that said, please rethink what you're doing. We want to protect our public lands in Colorado. And so that was encouraging to see the bipartisan support for that. And we'll be keeping an eye on everything that's happening in DC. I think I'll leave it there. As I mentioned, hundreds of bills that we could talk through, many that involve the environment. But those are some highlights from my end, and I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Yampa Valley Sustainability Council, for having us here today. I've been looking forward to this Zoom call, and thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, and especially the emphasis on Steamboat. I'm so proud to have grown up here. I am Meghan Lukens, and I was so excited to be reelected this last November into the Colorado House of Representatives, and so this was my third year at the state legislature, and I was very proud to be named the chair of the House Education Committee. I'm the only current educator on the House Education Committee because I still teach one civics class at Steamboat Mountain School every fall, since the legislative session is in the spring. And I was just honored to be named the chair of the House Education Committee this year. So of course, a lot of my bills this year focused on education. So I'm going to highlight a few bills in the education space, then talk about a few bills that were focused on rural Colorado, and then touch base on a few bills that connected with the environment. In the education space, I was proud to be the prime sponsor of the School Finance Act, which is how our schools in Colorado are funded each year. There was a lot of questions this legislative session about if we will be able to have school funding or decrease school funding at all, and I'm proud to say that we're actually increasing school funding this legislative session because the Joint Budget Committee was able to go through our budget with such a precision and see what we could cut in other areas. We were able to not only maintain the school funding that we have committed to, but actually increase school funding, especially in our rural areas, as well as implement the new student funding formula. So we are still on track to implement the new student funding formula, which has a particular emphasis on student-centered calculations, especially in our rural areas, as well as making sure that our students that are English language learners or special education are getting the funding that they deserve. So the School Finance Act this legislative session was a huge win, especially for rural Colorado. I also sponsored a bill that rewrote our entire accountability system in school education, meaning that schools that are struggling will get a modernized system of support from the state in order to get those schools back on track. In addition to that, I sponsored a bill that utilizes state funds and state funding to support educator home ownership. So any educator that is trying to buy a home for the first time, they will be able to use this funding source as a potential loan program if they choose to do so. And so that will help our teachers be able to attain affordable housing and be able to live in the communities where they work. In addition to that, I sponsored a bill in relation to limiting cell phones in schools. This bill is a local control perspective on limiting cell phones in schools, saying that every school district needs to have an effective policy in place to limit cell phones in schools. We know that technology in schools can be an effective tool for learning, but we already have Chromebooks Chromebooks in schools, and I know I've seen firsthand the negative impact that cell phones can have on kids' learning potential and kids' mental health. And so I was proud to sponsor that bill. And then one more bill I'll highlight in the education space was a bill that I worked on with Eagle County School District. Eagle County School District was not able to build solar panels on their school district property. And the reason that they were unable to do so was because the statutory requirements that they needed did not align with the statutory requirements that Holy Cross Energy needed. And so we basically unlocked some outdated statutory requirements that ensured that school districts across the state that want to build solar panels on their property are able to do so. We actually added in an additional component there that was in regards to affordable housing as well, saying that if school districts want to build solar panels or affordable housing on their property, the state will get out of the way and they can instead engage with their local governments and decide how to do so. As far as a few rural bills that I want to highlight, one of the bills that I was proud to sponsor this legislative session supports our rural pharmacies like Lion's Drug that we see in downtown Steamboat or Bonfiglio's in Oak Creek. We talked to a number of rural pharmacy owners that because of the negotiations with PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers, a lot of our rural pharmacies are across the state were having to close down because the amount of money that the consumer was giving them was actually less than the amount of money that they were receiving from insurance companies and PBMs. And so they weren't able to make ends meet. And because of this bill that we passed, this holds the PBMs accountable to ensure that our rural pharmacies are getting the money that they need when they are when they are giving prescriptions to people that are coming to get their prescriptions at their local rural pharmacies. In addition to that, I passed a bill that supports the capital needs of our rural and frontier hospitals. We know that our capital needs at our rural hospitals are struggling, and so this bill supports a task force that focuses on supporting our rural hospital needs. And then another bill that I'll highlight is in regards to tire traction, specifically on I-70. So we know that a lot of the accidents that happen on I-70 are because of semi-trucks. And so so when it comes to semi-trucks, they do have to put on their chains during blizzards or during winter driving season, but sometimes they need support. So this bill allows CDOT to license third-party vendors to help our truck drivers put their chains on their semi-trucks in the winter. And so that will be more of an incentive to actually support our truck drivers to get those chains on their tires. And so that bill was something that we certainly heard from our truck drivers as something that could help. And of course, we all use I-70 in the mountains, and we know how frustrating it can be when I-70 shuts down. So those are a few bills that I worked on. I want to also just highlight a few bills that the legislature passed, specifically when it comes to protecting our public lands. I know that Senator Roberts mentioned the great resolution that we passed at the state capitol, and of course I was proud to sponsor that resolution. Our state budget did invest $52 million to protect critical habitats, maintain infrastructure, maintain park facilities, and reinforce parks infrastructure, and $6.6 million to support amenities and educational programming when it comes to our parks. Another law that steps up to protect and conserve wildlife that is threatened or endangered, including native species in the upper Colorado River and across the state. And we also took steps to reduce the environmental impact of essential infrastructure and uncover new opportunities to enhance conservation, agriculture operations, and outdoor recreation on state trust lands. That was House Bill 1292 and House Bill 1332. That being said, there are so many more bills that we passed this legislative session, but we myself and Senator Roberts are always working hard to advocate for the Western Slope and advocate for our rural communities. And so I'm so grateful for all of the outreach that I received from all of you this legislative session at the state capitol. So certainly please stay in touch, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Great. Thank you both so much again for taking the time to come here on the heels of a big session, and we really appreciate the opportunity. So at this time, we can open it up for Q&A. I know A few people, I believe, had questions, and then also just take an opportunity if you haven't had a chance to connect. You can even just talk about the general issues that you're thinking about to kind of plant points of connection as we move forward in the year too. So if you do have a question, feel free to unmute. You kind of make a sound, or you can raise your hand and I'll call upon you. Yep, Paul LeBear.
Good. This is for Dylan. Hi, Dylan. Nice to see you today. My question is related to this the executive order by our president regarding opening up lands for drilling and energy production. To what extent does our state, I know you mentioned the fact that we have a resolution, but how do we protect the state from what could be a lot of intrusion by energy companies trying to drill and produce more gas and oil on state land?
Yeah, it's a very timely and good question, Paul. The unfortunate answer is we don't have a lot of options at the state level. You know, as federal lands, they are under federal jurisdiction, and so there's not a law that we could pass at the state level, or nothing that the governor or our Department of Natural Resources could do if it's solely federal lands. That being said, you know, there is a level of advocacy and process that would need to be honored if those decisions start to get made, whether it's selling public lands or opening up certain public lands for energy development. There's still, even though they've also tried to get rid of NEPA, there's still some level of process that would have to happen, some sort of public comment period. At least I would hope, you know, although, you know, some of those things are being ignored by the current administration. So I would just, it will fall on all of us to remain very vigilant about those decisions being made and being in contact with the appropriate officials, whether it's the U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, and then of course our federal representatives, I think, are very in support of preventing that, whether it's Senator Bennett, Senator Hickenlooper, or Congressman Neguse. So keep in touch with them frequently, and I know YVSC as an entity will do so as well. Wish I had a better answer for you.
Great, thank you. I think I saw Gail Gary with your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Senator Roberts and Representative Lukens. I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for your continued advocacy for Steamboat Springs as well as the Yampa Valley. We absolutely appreciate you and your willingness to be accessible and to report out and to solicit input. So thank you. As I say, we appreciate that. As you know, one of the things that we talk about and is certainly as part of our climate action plan. We have goals in terms of reducing vehicle miles traveled, reducing our emissions. As we obviously look at Highway 40 and the increased traffic between Steamboat and Craig, just some of the safety issues that we're facing there. And I'm curious regarding any comments that you want to provide on Mountain Rail and where you think that is and how it can address some of the issues, that we're facing in terms of reducing vehicle miles traveled, making it, safer highway, certainly less expensive, I think, than expanding Highway 40. So, with that, just really wanted to get both of your opinions, because I still think that there's, some concerns in the community about whether this is really a reality and whether it's going to come to fruition. And again, what your thoughts are and what we can do to help move that forward.
Sure, that's a great question, Gail. Thank you so much. It's great to see you. I can go first. So the Highway 40 is not only a public safety issue, but also a transportation issue, as well as a climate opportunity. And so we are always at the state state capitol advocating for transportation safety as well as mountain rail. I'm sure you all saw the recent news that the state of Colorado, CDOT, as well as the governor's administration has reached a historic agreement with Union Pacific, where 3 historic agreements were signed that are huge steps in the right direction as far as mountain rail. And so these agreements had to be made in order for there to be an agreement that we could use mountain rail and use the Union Pacific rail lines for passenger travel in addition to the freight travel that is already happening. And so with those historic agreements, that was signed about 2 weeks ago, and it was 3 contracts that were signed that were essential for this project to move in the right direction. And so not only did it allow for Moffett Tunnel to be utilized for passenger rail, but also all the way up to from Denver to Craig. And so we, from my understanding, this is not something that is going to happen overnight, but mountain rail is definitely on the right track and will certainly be happening faster than what we are seeing that our colleagues in the Front Range are advocating for with Front Range passenger rail. The first step of the process is going to be building passenger rail and passenger rail stops where actual passengers can get off from Denver all the way to Granby and have those rail lines with passengers be going 3 times a day. So that's the first big effort or the first leg, and then then we can continue building on from Granby and continue on from Granby to Steamboat all the way to Hayden and Craig as well. And so those are on track. We did pass 2 bills last legislative session that supports funding for passenger rail across the state of Colorado, as well as tax incentives to allow our local communities and especially our coal transitioning communities like Craig and Hayden to work alongside business opportunities that want to build and utilize our areas for business opportunities if there's a rail line available, which there soon will be, and hopefully that will incentivize businesses to build in our coal transitioning communities as well. So those 3 historic agreements were a huge deal. Obviously, there's more work to be done, and we can assure you that we're working hard. But this is a great step in the right direction and something that I'm very celebratory of, and as far as the future of transportation along Highway 40.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gail?
Oh, no, I just said thank you.
I see Paul Boney has a hand up, and we're seeing some questions come in on the chat as well. So please do raise your hands or post things in the chat. Thank you. Paul?
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you for this opportunity to meet with our rural representatives. I have a question first for the audience, and you all probably know me anyway, but I'm the Energy and Transportation Director here at the Sustainability Council. And Colorado has a very aggressive set of decarbonization goals, and we work every day to help the state meet those goals. And Senate Bill 22118, so from a few years ago, established and updated the rules for both solar and geothermal gardens, the intent of which was to lower the cost of power or electricity for folks that can combine their meters, and lower electric costs can make electricity more competitive with natural gas, which can then be, through electrification, can reduce our carbon emissions. But currently, as written, SB 22118 prohibits most rural Coloradoans from participating in solar and geothermal gardens. What are the chances of opening that legislation up next year so that all the folks in rural Colorado can get the same benefits that Black Hills Power and Excel customers have when it comes to lower cost electricity through solar and geothermal gardens?
Thanks so much for bringing this forward, Paul. We are definitely starting to look at next legislative session already, so I would love to add this to the list as something to look into. I know, and I would love to hear directly from you about what specifically it would look like to open it up, or how we could change the statute. I was not involved in that bill in 2022. I'm looking at it right now online. So I'd love to dig in a little bit more. I think Commissioner Macy's has brought this up to Megan and I before. So yeah, happy to start looking into it. Maybe we should connect separately about that.
Perfect. Well, we'll take that offline at another time
Yeah.
and place, and thank you for your interest.
Thanks.
I'll just chime in and say I'd love to have further conversations on that as well. So let's be in touch.
Great. And I'll take us to a question from Luke Phillips. Luke would be interested in learning more about Senator Roberts' bill, Senate Bill 25-127. Hope that it comes back to life next session.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you following that bill, Luke. So yeah, Senate Bill 127 was a bill that I introduced along with Senator Cleve Simpson that did not make it over the finish line this year, but it was essentially a requirement that energy companies, when they file their filings with the PUC, that they would need to start including their plans for adding in advanced transmission technologies, or ATTs. This is a way to modernize our electrical grid, to create redundancy, and to make sure that our transmission infrastructure is ready for the next generation of energy production, which we know will have an increased energy load, an increased electricity load, but from different sources. That was a tough bill because, as you can imagine, many of the big companies like Excel and Black Hills were initially very apprehensive and opposed to the bill. We worked with them closely. We did some amendments in its first committee hearing that got folks to a little bit better of a place, but we ultimately decided not to move the bill forward because the negotiations kind of stalled, and we were worried about it having a path through the legislature at that point. We do want to bring it back, then that's kind of why we decided not to continue moving forward, because if it had failed or had a negative vote at some point, that could have impacted our momentum for next legislative session. So as of right now, the plan is to keep working on that bill over the summer and bring it back next legislative session.
And we have a question from Betsy Blakesley. Could either of you please comment on the status of loosening the restrictions imposed by Tabor?
I can certainly comment. So thank you, Betsy, for the question. This legislative session, there was, I wonder if you're referring to the resolution in regards to questioning the constitutionality of Tabor. That resolution did pass the House Finance Committee, but it was not brought up for a vote on the House floor. So it did not make its way through the legislative process, but it certainly was a great conversation starter. Tabor is Tabor Taxpayer Bill of Rights certainly has its restrictions on, it mandates that whatever we as a legislature make, or as a state of Colorado make above the Tabor cap, has to be returned back to the voters in years that we have a revenue generated above the Tabor cap. And so that means that that money is not invested in our schools, our roads, our bridges, our healthcare system, Medicaid, HCPF, etc. And that certainly causes a strain on a lot of the things that we pay for as a state. But also Tabor is something that allows voters to vote on any tax increase. And so there are a lot of folks in the state that really like Tabor, and there are a lot of folks in the state that do not like Tabor. And it's certainly a continuous conversation that we are having at the state legislature. From my understanding, there are conversations around contemplating how we can support our schools and invest in our roads, and change some restrictions that Tabor presents that would come in the form of a ballot measure. Any changes to Tabor has to be approved by the voters, and from my understanding, there are conversations happening for a ballot measure in November of 2026. So I am not sure what exactly those changes would be, but it would certainly be a big topic in November of 2026 if we were to see a ballot measure in this regard.
Great. I can I would like to ask a question, and then anyone else, please raise hand, and again, put things in the chat. Senator Roberts, you mentioned that over 90% of the bills that were debated and discussed or that passed had bipartisan support. And recently, we had Nagus come to the Yampa Valley for a town hall, and he was talking about the ways in which there is still an impasse he's finding, in terms of bipartisan dialogue and really, reaching across the aisle. So curious for both of you, we at YVSC, we talk about the importance of not engaging, with climate work specifically, not, kind of foregrounding political divide or the partisanship of issues, but rather really focusing on the ways in which we connect to place and, shared values around clean water. So I would love to hear from you both personally, what do you find contributes to this high functionality in terms of achieving, 90% bipartisan support, and then, maybe some insights on what you personally do to really foster dialogue and work to that. So would love to hear your responses on that.
So I think a couple of things come to mind there. One, I think it's the structure of the legislature forces us to get our work done, and which at the end of the day, I think incentivizes compromise. As I mentioned earlier, we are constitutionally limited to 120 days, where we have to do all of our work. When the clock strikes midnight on that 120th day, we are done. And 120 days sometimes can feel like a really long time, but in the reality of getting the year's work for the whole state done, it is a very short amount of time. And so I think in most respects, people focus on finding solutions, on moving things forward, and getting the work done for the state and for the people of Colorado. I think another thing too is, and this isn't dissimilar from Congress, but they don't have those deadlines that we have. We're all coming in from various parts of the state. We get to be home in our districts during the summer and the fall. We hear from constituents like all of you and many other people about problems that they're having with in their communities, with their individual lives, or in their community, or in their county, or opportunities that they want to pursue, but they need support from the state, or they need a law changed at the state level. And so a lot of those ideas and challenges are not partisan things. They are practical things. And so we get to bring those ideas forward and introduce bills that are very practical and don't really have a political red versus blue, Democrat versus Republican lens. And so most of the bills that you look at are that they're technical, they are focused on a specific problem, and they are not partisan. And then I think, and Rep. Lukens and I think operate in a similar way, is we know we're coming from the Western Slope, from rural Colorado. There are fewer of us, just by the way that the population falls. There are way more metro and suburban legislators than there are rural legislators. And so we work very closely with our entire Western Slope and rural delegation, which of course includes a lot of Republicans, to focus on challenges that are specific to the Western Slope. And we have to stick together in order to get those passed, because we don't have as many votes as the metro areas do. And so that, I think, creates an incentive for us to work across the aisle to build relationships with people within our own caucus and the opposing party's caucus, because we want to get our bills passed and solve problems for our communities, but we can't do that with just sheer vote count. We have to build those relationships and tell our Western Slope story, if you will.
I love this question. Thank you so much for the question. This is part of the reason that I love Colorado government and Colorado state politics, because we are focused on solving problems and working together on behalf of the people of Colorado. And oftentimes that is best done, in my opinion, in a bipartisan way. I have heard from constituents across House District 26 that they want a government that is collaborative and bipartisan and focused on communication and working together. And as Senator Roberts said, we are focused as Western Slope legislators on solving problems for the Western Slope. And that means working together with our Western Slope colleagues. So I've found that the majority of my bills that I sponsor are alongside rural legislators, and that comes with a bipartisan lens. In addition to that, I like working with folks from across the aisle because we come into the bill with different perspectives, and I think that that just makes bills and lawmaking stronger to have different perspectives moving that bill forward. But in addition to that, I think it just comes down to, there's a lot more that there are a lot more similarities between people than there are differences. There's a lot of Democrats in the House of Representatives in Colorado. So a lot of us have to sit on what's called the Republican side of the aisle. And I have my desk on the Republican side of the aisle. And one of the most, as far as the political spectrum goes, the farthest right leaning legislators in the whole building sits right in front of me. And you would think that we don't talk at all, but I think that leaning in with kindness is really important. So something that brings him and I together is his kids play hockey. And, those of you know that I've always played hockey too. So he and I are always talking about hockey. And so we can just treat each other as humans, in addition to working together to get things done. And that's what we're certainly focused on at the state capitol.
Great. Thank you. Tim Sullivan.
Hi, thank you both, Senator Roberts and Representative Lukens, for joining us. And I want to ask a question that follows in that vein. I would talk about hockey, but we'll leave that for now. The context of working with representatives and representing a rural districts, you've both been really great advocates for the concerns of ranchers and dealing with the reintroduction of wolves to Colorado. And I'm curious where you feel we stand on that issue now, particularly in terms of what the state is doing currently and how well they are engaging and helping our rancher neighbors and friends cope with these changes that are happening around them as they go about their businesses and daily lives.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's an issue that Rep. Lukens and I work on a lot and have been involved with very closely since for many years now. I would say the status of things as far as the wolf reintroduction effort and the ranching community in Northwest Colorado, I would say things are getting better. Certainly not where I think anybody would want them to be, especially from the rancher's perspective, but improving. So heading in the right direction, I guess. We're in the middle of the second full year of having wolves on the ground. As you all know, first batch of wolves came in late 2023, early 2024, and then the second batch was early this year in January of 2025. And so right now is when, of course, cattle are out grazing, and we've heard of some depredations already during calving season, and expect to see more. But there is more of an extensive range rider program happening where folks are out there trying to deter wolves from livestock. More resources have been deployed, but I think folks are still frustrated with the not adequate enough resources being deployed. Certainly a lack of urgency in responding to calls for depredation, because part of the way that you get compensation for your lost animal is CPW has to confirm that it actually was a kill by a wolf. And when that takes longer than a day or so, other animals, other scavengers get to the carcass, and it becomes harder to determine whether that was a wolf kill or not. So that needs improvement. I think communication and just kind of respect between the state government and the ranching community is improving, but still has a ways to go. We actually inserted into the state budget this year a footnote, which isn't legally binding guidance, but it is very instructive language that basically says, how the funding that you're getting from the budget needs to be used. And the footnote we introduced basically said that CPW needs to honor and complete the 7 items that they said they would at the beginning of the year at their commission meeting, which were from the citizen petition that was filed to delay wolf reintroduction, which was denied, but there was a commitment at the same time to do those 7 things, which include a robust range riding program, better communication with ranchers and livestock owners, more funding for mitigation efforts, and a few other things. So that footnote said you better do those things with this money, and if you don't, then your line item for funding next year to go get more wolves and to continue this program may be at risk. So hoping that helps. We'll see. As of right now, it's been a less severe depredation season than it was last year, but there are more wolves on the landscape, many more wolves, and belief that they are having offspring as well during this season. So it will be a challenge. I think as lawmakers, we're concerned about our constituents, of course. I represent, in addition to Routt and Moffat counties, Grand County and Jackson County, where a lot of the initial wolf activity was, and we saw major challenges there with the depredation, and so we'll see what that looks like as the summer goes on.
Great. We have time for probably one more question. All right, I get to use the floor. I'm going to pose the last question. Again, I just want to underline and say thank you both for your really important leadership and service to this region, and all of the ways that you bring, our stories, your understandings of change. We at YVSC are really focused on increasing understanding and readiness and preparedness for, better enduring the impacts of changing climate. It is a tremendous issue driving change across the state of Colorado. We as an organization and as a region are so heartened to have, across scales of government, commitment to addressing climate change and really helping our communities prepare and be better equipped to go forward in the hotter and drier future. A question that bridges both education and the natural resources commitments that both of you bring to your service. Last year, there was the seal of climate literacy that was posed, and that is very unique. I was informed about it by people who were involved, and so curious your involvement, and if you could just share information about that. I know we have Jill Hinwood, who is the executive director of the Yampa Valley Partnership for Student Sustainability and Stewardship, and Lyra was the partner that was advancing that out of the Gates Family Foundation. So curious, discussions there, opportunities that you see for that to really continue to build and be that point of connection with increasing education of the impacts of changing climate, and then, tying that to education that then gives people, distinguishment as they move into the career and workforce. So.
Sure, I can take that one. That is a great question. I was in the committee hearing when that bill came through the House Education Committee last year to have the seal of climate literacy as an option. And for those of you that don't know, when seniors graduate from high school across the state of Colorado, they can have essentially a seal on their diplomas that show that they went above and beyond in a specific space. So students that are biliterate can earn a biliteracy seal. Students that are particularly passionate about the arts can receive a seal in regards to arts or science. And last year there was a bill that came forward that created the seal of climate literacy. This bill was one of the most exciting bills, in my opinion, at the House Education Committee last year, because every single person that came to testify in support of that bill was a high school student. And so as a former government teacher, just my heart was singing, because it was so many students that were being politically engaged and saying that this was important to them, that they wanted to have specific focuses at their high school that would support climate literacy, whether that's an environmental studies class, or I know that Steamboat Springs High School is doing great CTE programs, a lot of which connect to science and the outdoors. And so having a specific emphasis on climate literacy is very important. I know that when you are acquiring the seal of climate literacy, there's a kind of a spectrum of options that students can complete or achieve in order to get that seal of climate literacy. And one of them is coming down to the state capitol and testifying on bills. And I know for a fact that we had kids from House District 26 come to the Capitol and talk to legislators or testify on bills in order to achieve their seal of climate literacy. And so this is already happening across the state, and students are really excited about it because it aligns with a lot of their passion areas already. And I know that there are students in our neighborhoods that are excited about this as well. So it's certainly working. And I think this was a great optimistic question to end on because I think it's us investing in our future. So there's students that are taking advantage of this opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you both. We appreciate your service. Senator Roberts, Representative Lukens, we really, really appreciate you. We celebrate you. Thank you for joining us today, putting us on your stop of town halls following the legislative session, and we just appreciate it. So we will be in touch. Please reach out to any of us on the call, and have a wonderful day and keep up your phenomenal work.